There's a particular feeling you get when you sit on your own patio and realize it doesn't feel like yours. The neighbor's deck has a clear view of the table. A second-story window looks straight down at the lawn chairs. Cars on the road can see who's home. The yard is technically private, it just doesn't feel that way. A 6-foot fence usually doesn't fix this. 6 feet of cedar is enough to block someone walking by at ground level. The moment there's a deck, a balcony, a second story, or a slope nearby, the sightline is back. That gap is what a row of well-chosen plants is supposed to close. This video walks through 9 privacy plants for 9 real backyard situations. The narrow side yard where you can't give up width. The wide property line that needs real height. The shady north fence where most evergreens fail. The southern fence line where heat and humidity cook anything not built for it. The dry southwest yard where most things want more water than the climate gives. The yard that deer pass through every winter. And one tree at the end that gets recommended constantly in this country, often planted way too close to the house, that you should know about before you buy it. The goal here is matching, not racing. The fastest growing plant in the wrong spot does not give you privacy. It gives you a problem you have to deal with for the next 20 years. One thing before the list. Privacy planting is one of the areas where local rules matter more than people realize. So before any of these go in the ground, 3 things need to happen. Check your HOA bylaws. Check your municipal code or zoning ordinance. And call 811 for utility locates. There's a full breakdown of how to do that later in the video, because skipping it is how a beautiful living screen turns into a legal mess or a torn-up gas line. Now the plants. This is the tree most people picture when they hear privacy hedge. A neat, dense, columnar evergreen, about 10 to 15 feet tall and only 3 to 4 feet wide, with foliage that holds its color through cold winters. Botanically, it's Thuja occidentalis smaragd, which is Danish for emerald. Where emerald green earns its place is in tight spaces, side yards, strips between a driveway and a property line, townhouse backyards, anywhere a wider tree would crowd a fence or eat walkway space. It's hardy in USDA zones 3 through 7, which makes it one of the more cold-tolerant options on this list. If you're in Minnesota, Wisconsin, upstate New York, or northern New England, this plant handles your winters without complaint. Growth rate is where expectations have to stay honest. Most extension sources put emerald green at roughly 6 to 12 inches a year. That is not a screen by next summer. That is a screen in 4 to 6 years from young nursery stock. Buying taller plants moves the timeline forward, and most homeowners find that worth the cost when privacy is the actual goal. For a continuous hedge, space them 3 to 4 feet on center. Any closer and the inner branches eventually thin out from lack of light. Any wider and you'll see gaps for longer than you want. Here's the part the marketing tags tend to skip, and it's important if deer come through the neighborhood. Emerald green is not deer resistant. Multiple cooperative extension services have been blunt about this. The species Thuja occidentalis is highly palatable to deer. In winter, when natural food runs low, deer will browse emerald green right up to about 6 feet, which is the height a deer can reach standing. The damage shows as bare brown lower branches that do not grow back, because conifers don't push new foliage from old wood. Once a branch is stripped past the green, that gap is permanent. So emerald green is the right tree for cold zones, narrow space, no deer. In that combination, it's one of the cleanest hedges you can plant. If deer are a regular visitor, the next plant solves the same column-shaped problem differently. If the problem isn't a tight side yard, but a wide-open property line, a second-story neighbor window, or a back fence that needs to disappear behind real height, This is the tree most extension services point to first. Thuja Green Giant is a hybrid of two big species, Western red cedar and Japanese arborvitae, and it inherited the size of both. Mature height generally lands in the 30 to 50 foot range, sometimes more. Mature width is 12 to 18 feet. Growth rate is genuinely fast, 3 to 5 feet per year in good conditions, especially in the first decade. It's hardy in zones 5 through 8, and it can stretch into zone 9 in humid areas. That covers a large part of the country, from the mid-Atlantic across the Midwest and into the Southeast. Two practical points that matter more than the height number. First, the width. A green giant planted 4 feet from a fence is going to overhang the neighbor's yard within 10 years and lean on the fence eventually. Plant it at least 6 to 8 feet inside your property line, with similar setback from buildings. Second, the deer story. Green Giant has more natural deer resistance than emerald green, mostly because of its western red cedar parentage. That doesn't mean a starving deer won't sample it in February. It means deer pressure is meaningfully lower, and the tree generally outgrows browsing height before damage becomes structural. Spacing for a hedge is usually 5 to 6 feet on center. For a windbreak, where you want individual trees to fully develop, 10 to 12 feet. The closer end of that range fills in faster. The wider end keeps each tree healthier long term. Right tree, right yard. A property big enough to give it room. The wrong yard is a small suburban lot where 50 feet of evergreen will eventually own the whole backyard. This one is for the yards that have asked too much of arborvitae and lost. Spartan Juniper is hardy from zone 4 through zone 9, which is an unusually wide range. It tolerates winter cold that bothers most cypresses, summer heat that flattens most cedars, drought that kills almost everything else, and salt that ruins many junipers. Mature size is 15 to 20 feet tall and 3 to 5 feet wide, a real columnar form that holds its shape without shearing. Botanically, it's Juniperus chinensis Spartan. Growth rate is moderate by privacy screen standards, generally 12 to 18 inches per year, but it makes that growth in conditions where faster trees stall out. 3 things make Spartan worth knowing about. First, it's reliably deer-resistant. Junipers in general get passed over by deer because of the texture and resinous oils, and Spartan is no exception. Second, it tolerates the compacted, scraped, mineral subsoil that surrounds a lot of newer suburban houses, where the topsoil was removed during construction. Most evergreens hate that situation. Spartan handles it. Third, it accepts heat that the arborvitae family doesn't really like. The Southwest, the Southern Great Plains, the hot and dry pockets where standard arborvitae go thin and patchy. There's one limit. Junipers want full sun and sharp drainage. They don't want wet feet. A heavy clay yard that holds water through the winter is not a Spartan yard. The other note, any juniper can become an alternate host for cedar apple rust if there are apple or crabapple trees nearby. The disease usually disfigures the apple, not the juniper. But if a commercial orchard or a heavy apple block is across the fence, ask before planting. For a screen, space Spartan 3 to 4 feet apart. For a more open vertical accent, 5 to 6 feet. Now the climate shifts. If you're gardening from coastal Virginia down through the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, the Gulf states, and East Texas, the privacy plant that handles your climate best is probably native to your area already. Wax myrtle, botanically Myrtle cerifera, and you'll still see it sold under the older name Myrica cerifera, is a broadleaf evergreen, not a needled conifer. The leaves are glossy, narrow, olive green, and aromatic. They smell like bayberry when crushed. The texture in a hedge is completely different from arborvitae or juniper, looser and softer, more like a tall, informal evergreen shrub than a wall of cone. Native range runs from New Jersey down through Florida and west to Texas, with extensions into Mexico and the Caribbean. Hardy in zones 7 through 10, with the caveat that in the coldest part of that range, Northern Virginia, Central North Carolina, it can be semi-evergreen and may brown out in a hard winter. The further south, the more reliably evergreen it stays. Size is typically 10 to 20 feet tall and similar in width. Growth is genuinely fast for an evergreen, several feet per year in good conditions. It tolerates wet soil, dry soil, sandy soil, salt spray, full sun, and partial shade. That's an unusual list. Wax myrtle survives the kinds of yards where most ornamentals die. 1. Honest behavior. Wax myrtle suckers. In good conditions, it sends up shoots from the roots and forms a colony over time. That's a feature if you want a thick, informal screen along a wooded edge or a wet swale. It's a maintenance item if you want a tidy, defined hedge against a manicured lawn. The colonizing edge can be edged out with a sharp spade once a year. It's not a runaway plant. It's a shrub that wants to be a thicket. For a fast-closing screen, space 5 to 6 feet apart. Leave them wider and they fill in over time on their own. Wax myrtle also takes hard pruning well, which means if it gets too big, you can renovate it with confidence. This is the plant for shade, and shade is where most privacy screens fail. If your fence line runs along the north side of a tall structure, or it's overhung by a neighbor's mature trees, or you've already tried arborvitae in that spot and watched it thin out from the inside. Cherry laurel, Prunus laurocerasus, sometimes sold as shipkiensis or ship laurel, is one of the few fast-growing broadleaf evergreens that actually performs in low light. Mature size is generally 10 to 20 feet tall and 8 to 15 feet wide. Growth is fast, 2 to 3 feet per year in good conditions. Hardy in zones 6 through 9. Leaves are large, glossy, and a deep, luxurious green, which gives the hedge a softer, more traditional look than a row of conifers. White flower spikes appear in spring. Now the 2 caveats, because the nursery tag almost never includes them. The first one is toxicity. Cherry laurel is in the Prunus family, which means leaves, stems, seeds, and especially the cherry-like fruits contain cyanogenic compounds. That makes the plant toxic if ingested in any quantity by pets, livestock, and humans. The leaves smell faintly of almonds when crushed, and that's the cyanide compound speaking. If your dog tends to chew on plants, if you have horses or backyard chickens, or if young grandchildren spend unsupervised time in the yard, this is not the right hedge. The screening function is genuinely useful. The plant just has a chemistry that some households should not invite in. The second caveat is regional. In the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington, parts of British Columbia, and Northern California, cherry laurel has escaped cultivation and become a problem in natural areas. Birds eat the fruit, fly into adjacent forests, and the seedlings shade out native understory plants. Oregon State University Extension and the Washington State Noxious Weed Control Board both list it as an invasive concern. There are similar reports from parts of the Mid-Atlantic, so if you're in those regions, this is a plant to check on with your county extension office before planting. There are usually safer, locally appropriate shade screens. Some of the upright viburnums, American holly, or certain hardy hollies, depending on zone. Right yard for cherry laurel. A heavy shade situation in a region where it isn't on the invasive list, with no chewing pets or grazing animals on the property. In that combination, it solves a problem almost nothing else solves. If part of your privacy concern is people or animals cutting through the yard, this is the plant that does 2 jobs at once. Nellie R. Stevens holly is a hybrid, Ilex Nellie R. Stevens, bred from English holly and Chinese holly. Mature size is 15 to 25 feet tall and 8 to 15 feet wide, with a broad pyramidal shape and dense, glossy, dark green leaves. Growth is moderately fast, about 2 to 3 feet per year. Hardy in zones 6 through 9. The leaves have spines. They are not friendly. A row of Nellie Stevens at full size becomes a barrier that deer won't push through, dogs won't squeeze through, and people don't volunteer to brush past. From your side of the property, looking at the hedge, it reads as a lush, dark green wall. From a coyote's perspective, it reads as the wrong place to go. It also produces an exceptional display of bright red berries from late fall through winter. Nellie Stevens is unusual among hollies because she'll set fruit without a male pollinator nearby, though berries are more abundant if a male Chinese holly is within range. The berries are mildly toxic if eaten in quantity by pets or humans, which is worth knowing if you have very young children or a dog that grazes on things in the yard. Songbirds, on the other hand, love them. Cedar waxwings, mockingbirds, and robins regularly strip a row of Nellie Stevens berries in late winter. Light flexibility is the other reason this plant earns its slot. It performs in full sun and in partial shade. In hot southern zones 8 and 9, afternoon shade actually helps prevent leaf scorch. That makes Nellie Stevens one of the few privacy plants that solves the problem on a mixed sun-shade fence line where one end is bright and the other end sits behind a structure. Spacing for a dense hedge, 5 to 6 feet on center. Wider for a more open row of specimen trees. This one is for a very specific set of yards, arid Southwest. West Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona, dry California, parts of the Southern Rockies. Hot, sunny, low humidity climates where most evergreens wilt by August. Carolina Sapphire is a cultivar of Arizona cypress, botanically Cupressus arizonica, variety glabra, Carolina Sapphire. The foliage is not green. It's silvery blue, sometimes almost teal, with a soft texture and a clean, cedar-like fragrance when brushed. Size at maturity is 20 to 30 feet tall and 10 to 12 feet wide. Growth is fast, 2 to 3 feet per year in good conditions. Hardy in zones 6 through 9. Once established, it's one of the most drought-tolerant privacy evergreens available. It actively prefers dry, well-drained, sunny conditions. 2 important, honest notes before this goes on the shopping list. First, humidity. The University of Florida Extension is direct about this. Arizona cypress was widely planted in the southeastern United States, but it performs best in the drier parts of the Southwest. In humid, clay-heavy yards in the Deep South, the roots stay too wet, the trees develop weak anchorage, and storm winds can topple them. So Carolina Sapphire is a Southwest and dry South tree, not a Gulf Coast tree. Second, allergies. Cypress pollen, including from Carolina Sapphire, is a known allergen and can cause significant reactions for sensitive people. If anyone in the household has seasonal cypress, cedar, or juniper allergies, plant a single specimen first and watch a season before committing to a full row. In the right climate, on the right soil, this tree is genuinely striking. A row of silvery blue cypress against a stucco house or a desert landscape doesn't look installed. It looks like the property always belonged there. There's a column-shaped evergreen native to 37 American states that gets recommended far less than it should. Eastern red cedar, Juniperus virginiana, is one of the toughest, longest-lived, most adaptable evergreens on the continent. The cultivar that matters for privacy is Taylor, selected at the Nebraska Statewide Arboretum from a seedling found in Taylor, Nebraska, and released in the early 1990s. Taylor juniper holds the cold hardiness of the species, zones 4 through 9, sometimes pushed into Zone 3. But it has a narrow, columnar habit that reads almost like an Italian cypress. Mature size is 15 to 25 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide. The foliage is silvery blue-green in summer and turns to a brownish maroon tint in deep winter, which is normal for the species and not a sign that the plant is dying. For yards in the upper Midwest, the Great Plains, the Mountain West, and the cold corners of New England, this is the plant that makes sense. It tolerates drought, alkaline soil, urban pollution, walnut juglone, and salt. It's reliably deer-resistant. The bluish, berry-like cones feed cedar waxwings, mockingbirds, and a long list of other birds through the winter, which is part of the appeal for homeowners who want a yard that does something for wildlife as well as for the sightline. 2 honest caveats. First, eastern red cedar is an alternate host for cedar apple rust, a fungal disease that needs both a juniper and an apple family tree to complete its life cycle. The disease usually disfigures the apple, not the cedar. If you live near a commercial orchard or a neighbor with a row of crabapples, ask before planting. Second, like most junipers, Taylor is susceptible to bagworms. Scout the row in late summer for the small, hanging, cocoon-like bags and remove them by hand in winter. Catching them early keeps a manageable problem from becoming a defoliation problem. Spacing for a screen, 3 to 4 feet on center. The narrow form means even a tight planting doesn't waste yard width. I'm putting this one last on purpose. Leyland Cypress is the most aggressively recommended privacy tree in the eastern half of the country, and it's also the most frequently replaced. Both things are true, and the second one is what most homeowners don't hear before they plant it. The case for Leyland Cypress is real. It grows 3 to 5 feet per year, sometimes more. It can reach 50 to 70 feet tall and 15 to 25 feet wide. It tolerates a wide range of soils, handles salt spray, and screens a property in 2 or 3 growing seasons. For a large rural lot, a coastal property, or a wide setback where nothing else seems fast enough, those numbers are appealing. Now the part that has to be said. University Extension Services from Clemson, the University of Georgia, NC State, and several others have been raising the same warning for years. Leyland Cypress is highly susceptible to Ceridium canker and Botryopsferia canker, which are fungal diseases that cause branches to brown and die, then move into the trunk. Once a Leyland is infected, there is no effective cure. Healthy trees can fight off light infections. Drought-stressed trees can't. And Leyland Cypress is much more prone to canker disease when it goes through dry summers. It's also a preferred host for bagworms, which can defoliate a row in a few weeks. Phytophthora root rot is a third problem in poorly drained soil. A big part of the problem is how Leyland Cypress is usually planted. Most homeowners, and many landscapers, set the trees 4 to 6 feet apart because the marketing photos show a tight, closed wall in 5 years. Clemson Extension specifically recommends 12 to 15 feet between trees because the air circulation between mature plants is what keeps Ceridium canker from spreading. A row of Leylands planted too close eventually becomes a corridor for the disease. So here's how to think about Leyland Cypress honestly. If you have a large property, full sun, well-drained soil, and you're willing to plant 12 to 15 feet apart and water deeply through summer droughts, this tree can do a job nothing else does. If you have a small suburban lot, want to plant 6 feet apart, and want to do it close to a fence or a house, this is the wrong tree. Almost every Thuja Green Giant is a better choice than a too close, drought-stressed Leyland Cypress. Leyland is also the tree that ends up planted closest to property lines, septic fields, and foundations, simply because nobody told the owner how big it eventually gets. So if it goes in, give it space. Minimum 15 feet from any structure, well clear of a septic drain field, and well inside your own property line. A privacy row is one of the few things a homeowner plants that touches utility law, neighbor law, and HOA bylaws all at once. Before any tree on this list goes in the ground, 3 checks. None of them are optional, and all of them are free. Call 811 before you dig. Every state has a free utility locate service reachable through 811, and most states legally require it. A representative comes out, marks gas, electric, water, sewer, and communication lines on your property, and that mark stays valid long enough to plant. Nicking a gas line with a shovel is a worst-case scenario that happens every year in this country, and it is fully avoidable. Check your HOA bylaws and your local ordinance. Despite what online videos sometimes claim, there is no blanket rule that local governments cannot regulate the height of a living tree. Many municipalities cap hedge height in front yards, regulate trees within sight triangles at intersections, regulate plantings within rights-of-way along the road, and enforce view easements in scenic areas. HOAs can be even more restrictive. Some require approval for any tree over a certain height, some restrict species, and some require maintenance of shared hedges. Read the bylaws. Make a phone call to the planning department. 20 minutes now beats a takedown order in 3 years. Plant well inside your own property line. A tree planted directly on the boundary becomes what's called a boundary tree in most state law, which gives your neighbor joint ownership and joint authority over what happens to it. Keep the trunk at least 3 to 5 feet inside the line. Account for mature width. A green giant planted 4 feet inside the line still hangs over the fence by year 10, which can be a real source of neighbor friction. Stay clear of underground problems. Septic drain fields need a minimum of 10 feet of root-free clearance from most evergreen trees, sometimes more. Foundations, driveways, and sidewalks need at least the mature canopy width of distance. Closer than that, and roots can lift concrete or destabilize footers. Power lines overhead change the math entirely. Anything that's going to reach 30 feet tall doesn't belong under a 20-foot wire. 2 more practical points that determine whether the row succeeds or fails. Water in the first year matters more than anything else. New trees, especially conifers, need deep, slow watering through the first growing season. Set a hose at the base of the trunk at low pressure, let it run for an hour or 2, and walk away. Do that once or twice a week in the first summer when rainfall is short. Quick sprinkles do almost nothing. Mulch with a ring, not a volcano. 2 to 3 inches of mulch in a ring out toward the drip line, pulled back 3 or 4 inches from the trunk so the bark stays dry. Mulch piled against the trunk holds moisture, invites insects, and rots the bark. This one habit causes more slow-motion tree deaths than almost anything else. And for the conifers in this list, Arborvitae, Juniper, Cypress, never prune past the green into the brown interior wood. Those branches don't push new growth. If you cut into old wood, the gap stays. Light annual shaping is fine. Hard renovation pruning of a conifer is usually a one-way trip. 3 plants come up constantly in privacy conversations and earn a brief warning. Hybrid willow gets advertised as a 6 to 10 feet a year miracle. The growth rate is real. The root system is also real, and it actively seeks water. Hybrid willow roots invade septic tanks, sewer lines, foundation drains, and driveway underlayments, and they can do it within a decade. The repair costs run into the tens of thousands. Skip it. Running bamboo, most species in the genus Phylostachys, does what its name says. It runs underground rhizomes and pops up where you don't want it, often in the neighbor's yard, sometimes through asphalt. Some states regulate or ban it specifically because of how aggressively it spreads. Clumping bamboos in the Fargesia group are a different story and may be appropriate in some zones. But if a sales tag just says bamboo, assume it runs unless proven otherwise. Common privet, ligustrum species, is on multiple state invasive plant lists, particularly in the southeast and mid-Atlantic, where birds spread the seeds into natural areas. There are plenty of better hedge plants. Skip the privet. Privacy planting is one of those projects where the wrong plant in the wrong spot becomes a permanent feature of the property, and the right plant in the right spot just quietly does its job for decades. The work in the first year is real: the watering, the mulching, the spacing. But it's also the only year that requires that much attention. After that, most of the plants on this list ask for very little. Pick one situation in your backyard that bothers you most: the deck that looks straight down at the patio, the road that suddenly feels too close, the shaded fence corner where every previous plant has thinned out. Match the situation to the tree. Then go through the 3 checks before any digging happens. 811, the ordinance, the property line. Tell me 2 things in the comments: your state, or at minimum your USDA zone, and which sightline in your backyard is the one you actually want to close. Window? Deck? Road? Fence? That information shapes what gets covered next on this channel. Because privacy planting in Zone 4 in Wisconsin is a different conversation than privacy planting in Zone 9 in Texas, and both deserve real answers. If practical garden advice that takes the plant tag and translates it into what actually happens in a real American yard is what you want, this channel publishes new videos like this one every week. Subscribing means the next one finds you instead of the other way around. Match the plant to the sightline. Plant it inside your own property line. Water it deeply for 1 season, and then sit on your own patio without having to think about who can see in.